Welcome back. So, actually, hold on. Stop. Welcome back. This is one of those cameras that if you follow me on social media, if you've listened to any of the podcasts that I've been on, or if you just hear me talk about photography and cameras in general, might not be something you're expecting me to talk about and talk about so enthusiastically. I'm not a huge fan of toy cameras. It's just not my style. There's nothing wrong with using toy cameras or that aesthetic, but it's just not for me. I prefer something much more kind of straightforward and to the point. And so when I stumbled onto the Lomo LC-A here, it was a really pleasant surprise and kind of a shock to me, to be honest. So to backtrack a little bit, for those who aren't aware, the Lomo LC-A is really kind of the pinnacle Lomo camera, and it's where it all got started for them. It was these marketing students. They were from Vienna. They went to the Soviet Union, bought a couple of these cameras, discovered they have a kind of weird image rendering to them, and the rest is history. They started Lomography as kind of a thesis project, basically, for their senior year. And it's all based around this camera. This is the original version. It's not the LC-A Plus. And if you're thinking about buying one of these cameras, and you go, oh, well, do I want the LC-A? Do I want the LC-A Plus? Personally, I go with the LC-A. The LC-A Plus does have a few perks to it. It has a threaded shutter cable, it has a bulb mode, and it also has ISO available up to 1600, whereas this has standard shutter, automatic exposure only, and only up to ISO 1400. But what it lacks there, it really makes up for an overall build quality. The plastic is much nicer. It has a much heftier feel. It feels much more solid. If you ever get a chance to hold the LC-A Plus and the LC-A, or even the LC Wide and the LC-A, or the LC-120 and the LC-A, always this camera will feel better. It's funny, it weighs actually about the same as the LC-A 120, even though the LC-A 120 is so much bigger. It's a much more robust camera. It's based off the Cosina CX1 and CX2. And if you ever look at one of those, you can really see where a lot of the design influence comes from. The overall shape really... In fact, the only thing that's truly different in terms of how it operates is that to open up the lens, you go like this. With the Cosina, you actually rotate this entire front panel here 90 degrees to the left, and that gets the lens opened up. Speaking of the lens, it's a 32mm 2.8 Minotaur 1. The Minotaur 1 doesn't really mean anything. It was kind of Lomo and the Soviet Union's way of branding their own lenses, despite there not really being anything there to back up that claim, or to back up that branding. There was, as far as I'm aware, there was never a Minotaur 2 or any other Minotaur lenses. Minotaur's not this storied past of a lens manufacturer. It's really just with the LC-A. But it is a 2.8, so it's reasonably fast. 32mm, which is kind of an odd focal length, but I find that is close enough to 35 that if you were to compare this with an actual 35mm lens side by side, you wouldn't really notice any difference. But it's primarily an automatic camera. It's really designed to be used only in automatic mode, and you can see on the right here you have this switch which will adjust your f-stop or put it into A all the way at the bottom there for automatic. This is another thing that Lomography got rid of on their version, and I can understand why. The aperture is really only to be used in conjunction with flash for guide numbers. Depending on how far away you are, you can set the aperture and make sure that the automatic mode doesn't override it or doesn't make it weird, because it is a rear curtain sync, so the flash fires as the lens starts to close rather than right after it's completely open, and that can lead to some blurring or some weird effects. Basically what would happen is you push a shutter, the lens opens, it starts taking in light, and this uses a really simple, it starts taking in light, and then once it's done, flash fires, lens closes. And this uses a really simple light metering system that it can best be described like filling up a glass of water. If you have an empty glass, that's kind of how the camera is at its base. And what will happen is, as you open the shutter, water will start to fill up the glass, and then once the glass is full, the water turns off, the shutter closes. Now, depending on how much light is available, will depend on how quickly that glass fills up. So if it's really dark out, it'll be a slow trickle. If it's really bright out, it'll be a flash flood, and it'll be really, really quick for that glass to fill up. But that's basically how this type of light meter works. It's not like a more high-end meter where the camera will sense how much light is available and adjust the shutter speed and aperture accordingly. This will kind of just get it to where it needs to be, and then it's done, and it's fine, and it moves on, and it's not a horrible system, to be honest with you. It works pretty reasonably well, but outside of that, it's not super feature filled. So it is zone focus. It has 4 zones: 0.8 meters, 1.5 meter, 3 meter, and infinity. And it actually makes it pretty easy to use. What I'll typically do if I'm out shooting this, it's small enough, that it can fit in a pocket pretty well. This is a shirt pocket. I obviously wouldn't carry it around like that, but just to give you a sense of scale. I'll usually keep it at infinity, and then if I ever have to adjust really quickly, if I'm doing a little bit of street photography, something like that, I know that where I'm set at, 1 click is 3 meters, 2 clicks is 1.5, 3 clicks is 0.8. And so I can adjust from there, and I always know kind of where I'm at as a base at infinity, and I can just move it on up to scale. Uses a click wheel for the film advance. Excuse me. Uses a click wheel for the film advance and a manual rewind as well. As far as the kind of how the camera works, you open it up, like I said, and you point and focus and shoot. There are 2 LEDs inside of the viewfinder that will light up if there's not enough ambient light, and if you're going to be below 1/30th of a second. So keep that in mind. But because it's a pretty easy to use leaf shutter system, I've never had any problems with hand holding at slower shutter speeds. Just kind of be aware of how much light is in there, and when it says it's going to be below 1/30th, does that mean it's going to be 3 seconds, or does that mean it's going to be 1/15th or 1/20th of a second? There are a whole bunch of accessories that you can get for this, and mine's actually been a little bit modified. Lomography makes an instant back for it, which I had for a while. I only put a few packs through it, and it was all right. But that's why it has a different thing, because the whole back can come off. You can also get wide angle attachments for it that I believe put it at about a 21 to 24 millimeter focal length, which is pretty reasonably wide, again, in a small package. It does have a tripod mount. But that leads me to kind of my next thing. There's no self-timer, there's no threaded cable release, so what can you do with the tripod mount? Well, you can use it to take night exposures, because as I was talking about earlier with the metering system, it fills up slowly, so bull mode can go on for eternity, basically. The only problem is bull mode only lasts as long as you have your finger depressed on the shutter. So as soon as you let off, even if you're not done taking that photo, the shutter's going to close. And it will drain your battery pretty quickly if you do use that. There are a few other things on here that are kind of interesting. Really quick though, it does use LR44 batteries, so SR44 batteries, really standard battery. It takes 3 of them if I'm not mistaken. In here I actually have a double SR44 and then a single to get me there, and it works. But so you have things like this on the bottom, which if you are experienced with cameras at all, this to me looks like it's an attachment for a motor drive, to be honest, but there were no accessories like that made for these cameras. And this camera, I did want to say I bought it in 2011. I bought it almost exactly 5 years ago, half a decade ago, which is crazy. And I bought it in Boston. My girlfriend and I, we were on a trip there, and I brought a digital camera. This was before I was shooting film exclusively, and I just wasn't enjoying myself, so I hopped on Craigslist last night, found this guy for $15. Which at the time was a really good deal. Now, not as much. You can find these for around $50, not shipped, but $50 on eBay from the Soviet Union. They made so many of these damn things that they're all over the place and the market's saturated. You can pick one up for pretty cheap. But then this was a book I made of the photos from Boston that I took with the camera. They're not great, but this was a book, and it was actually also it was kind of a test to see how Blurb's quality was, and so it's kind of like a little zine. I'll include a link on this in the description below. But thank you for watching. Please be sure to follow me, subscribe to this channel, follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. I have links to both of those accounts in the description below. So again, thank you for watching, and until next time.